Welcome to One on One. I'm Phil Tillman, your host. And in our continuing effort to introduce candidates to the potential voters in Wicomico County, we're delighted to welcome into our studio Delegate Mike McDermott. And Delegate McDermott, welcome.
Phil, thanks for having me on.
And maybe, if you have your wish, we'll call you Senator.
Yeah, that'd be great, and I'd love to come back in and chit chat with you in the coming years.
I hope so.
Yeah, about what's going on. So.
Kind of describe 38 because there's been a lot of redistricting.
Yeah, there have been. Some people call it gerrymandering, but there's been a lot of cutting up of the district, which is really why I'm running. One of the reasons that I'm running for the Senate is this is kind of the tactics that happen in Annapolis every 10 years. But the redistricting, basically 38 is still the lower shore. So it's still all of Somerset, all of Worcester, and about half of Wicomico County, more or less. They took a little bit of Wicomico out and put it in District 37 to make the numbers balance out. But they're also looking at shifts of power. I mean, they took our sub-districts, the delegate districts. Well, we used to have, I used to share the district with Delegate Conway, and it was all of Worcester and half of Wicomico, which is 2/3 of the Senate district. And Charles Otto was a single member there in Somerset County, a little bit of Wicomico. Well, they took all that and shifted it around, so now they put Charles and I, who just happened to be the two Republican delegates, and put us in the same. Shocking.
Imagine that.
It's shocking, I tell you. So they put us together, and then they made our district more heavily Democrat. And then they took the other two sub-districts. They made Delegate Conway's is awfully small now. It's mainly Salisbury and Del Mar, and it doesn't go out too far in the county.
Yeah.
And of course, the North Worcester district and the Eastern Wicomico section, that's a predominantly Republican area. I always call that's the sacrificial district. They had to have one area where they try and lump everybody in so that they can carve out what they want, which is to eliminate a lot of the minority party. Even though it's small in number in Annapolis, they don't like a lot of the conservative views that come, and they're trying to create an environment where that doesn't happen. That facilitated really it was either Charles and I beating up on each other, which is ridiculous because we believe the same things, we generally vote the same way. To go ahead and say, look, we need to take the Senate seat back too from our perspective, and return it to the conservative values that we've always had.
Yeah. So it is a Senate seat currently occupied by Jim Mathias.
Yes.
So you and Jim Mathias are running head to head now that the primary is over. And Mike, tell us a little bit about some of the issues that you think are facing the state of Maryland in the term to come, the 4 years to come.
You're going to have there's going to be a lot of pain for Maryland, and economically we have not recovered. We're very flat as far as the state's concerned. You're 49th in economic recovery as far as all the economic prosperity, if you will, across the whole United States. Maryland is at the very bottom when it comes to our economy. It's flat. We are 42nd when it comes to being a business-friendly state, which that supports why our economy is not moving. And if you look down, you don't have to look very far. When you look on the shore and you see the mom-and-pop businesses that have closed, you see the large retailers that have moved out of the area, boarded up shop. We've experienced an aggregate number of businesses that have fled Maryland, more so even down on the Eastern Shore. We've lost more, and we're not recovering like some of the areas closer to the D.C. metro core that rely more on government prosperity. You know, we're more dependent upon commercial development and basically our industry. If our industry vacates and we're not doing anything in the private sector, which Maryland's really suffering right now, that's when you get these huge job losses. So for us, when you look down the road, you're trying to plan from the government perspective. They're working off tax dollars. So as the economy's prospering and booming, the government itself draws in more revenue, and they're able to do more with it. And unfortunately, during those kinds of times, the liberals tend to expand government and absorb all that extra money with real jobs and other things within government. They grow government. And now we're dealing with the fact that we grew government during times that were better, and then we had to contract government. Well, government's not really contracting. And these areas are really, we're still supporting that, and we're taking more money out of our economy. And I think that's the toughest thing that Marylanders are going to face. If you live here, you've already seen us losing. Last month we lost 8,000 jobs in 1 month. When you see that kind of exodus of wealth out of the state, the government itself is reeling from that. And they're trying to figure out exactly where they're going to pay their bills from. And the only place that Maryland has narrowed it down now is coming down to the taxpayer. And that's why we've got people that make $100,000 now. The state considers them very wealthy people, and they're taxing them at higher rates. Our business communities are suffering as a result of that. People are not coming to build businesses in Maryland. They're certainly not expanding in Maryland. And when you see that kind of exodus stacking up, it's a domino effect. And those dominoes are going to fall. And it's not a matter of if they're going to fall or are we going to have this problem. It's a matter of how much that impact's going to be and how hard are we going to feel it down the road. And if you can imagine, if we get a more austere government in the White House, if the federal government, which is already experiencing similar problems, if they actually try to get a grip on their bottom line, that affects Maryland even more because we are so dependent on those dual incomes coming out of Washington, D.C. So from my perspective, when I look out on Maryland's horizon, see, if we can't get our ship in order, if we can't get more businesses interested in coming to this state and building up our economy, how do we explain to our kids that we've lost every Fortune 500 company that we had under O'Malley's watch? I don't even know how do you even justify, how can anybody not look at that and say, man, that's problematic. We had 11 when Ehrlich left office. We've lost 10. And McCormick is sitting there looking at Pennsylvania. Can you imagine Old Bay being made up in Pennsylvania and being sold to Marylanders? Something is the pride of Baltimore City.
Yeah.
These are the things that we face that when you ask me, well, what needs to be addressed? Man, our economy, government really can't do a lot when it comes to trying to create jobs and everything. That's the job of the private sector. But I'll tell you one thing, government can really crush the private sector when it comes to permits, fees, regulatory environment, taxes. It can make it so untenable that somebody looks at a business opportunity and says, well, I can build this anywhere. Where am I going to be the most profitable? Where can I get a return to my investors? And Maryland's not at the top of their list.
What can a state senator from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, how can he affect some change in attitude in Annapolis?
Man, that's a great question. Well, one of the things that I've done is number one, you have to be able to be outspoken about these issues. You have to be able to articulate what the problem is for the Eastern Shore and not just be satisfied. I am not satisfied with crumbs that are falling from the plate that the General Assembly carves up for us every year and come back and act like we've done something. We have to build a broad coalition with the folks that are suffering in Maryland. And I happen to know, I know that people in Prince George's County and Baltimore City, those families are suffering just as much as Eastern Shore families. Their wealth is down. The middle income America for us in Maryland has shrunk. Those people suffer just as much. If we have real leadership that's really focused on, Phil, you've heard this now for 12 years. All I've heard every election year is the same 3 words. Jobs, jobs, jobs. I heard them 4 years ago, these same guys, one of the guys I'm running against, it was about we're going to focus like a laser beam on jobs. And I thought, and yet we've done just the opposite of what we need to do. So we have got to start actually listening to the studies. They did studies after, I know you find it's hard to believe that Annapolis actually studies everything, right? And we've studied all of these different things. We actually had a bill last year to study how to make Maryland more business friendly. Well, that's great. I mean, it's great. It had a lot of recommendations in it for things that we could do. We have to start adopting some of those things. All of those committees are bipartisan. They bring in the best minds that we have. We just need an administration that has the will to do it, to change the course that we're on. Because we've been on this course for 8 years, and I suspect if everybody looks around, they'll think, this is not getting us where we want to be. It's just not delivering. It's not delivering on our economy. It's not delivering on the jobs platform. If you continue to do this same thing, you're going to get the same results. That's the nature of it. So we have to pivot. We've got to get, number one, we need a governor that's going to look after this thing a little bit differently and come at it from a different way of thinking, And then you've got to have a General Assembly that can support those programs. And, you talk about, we talk about partisanship and the way things get divided. Well, Maryland families suffering and talking enough, that's what gets legislators together. And I think if we have a governor that wants to do a different thing, legislators that understand that we're suffering and we've got to change the way that we think in Annapolis, that's something that can get done. And you've got to have leaders. We don't need followers. I mean, that place is full of followers. It's full of followers. We've got to have men and women that actually have an understanding of standing up and speaking out and raising up a standard and not accepting, status quo. I'm so tired of it. I'm tired of guys getting elected because getting reelected is the end goal. It's not the end goal for leadership for us. We need leaders from the shore that are going to represent our values and not just go up there and basically make a nice nest that will last them for 20 years and then come home and pat themselves on the back about some of the good things they did. Our people are hurting and they deserve better than that.
Mike, it just occurred to me, what do you think about term limits?
I love them. I love them. I'll tell you, I will be the first one to say that term limits are a viable option. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I think Washington set the example when he said 2 terms as president of the United States is enough for a man. And you saw people follow that pattern because it was understood. It's good to get fresh legs in the game. I would submit to you that 12 years in the General Assembly in one of those offices is plenty of time. You've been over there over a decade. You've led us. You've served us. Great. Now it's time for you to get out or move up or whatever you're going to do. It's time for you to go someplace else and get some fresh legs in the game. What happens in Annapolis is you get wined and dined. There's the open bars and the open buffets. The money flows and the people are treating you as if you're some type of royalty. And that's one of the problems with government in our country is it's become the ruling class. Well, they treat you that way in Annapolis. So all this gets rolled out for people in order for the people to get what they want. They want certain nuance in a bill and certain things done a certain way. Mainly, they want status quo. They don't want that to change. They don't want to upset the apple cart. The longer you stay in office, the more co-opted by those types of things you get. You build relationships with people that you don't want to say no to. You're sitting with somebody for 8 years in the General Assembly, and all of a sudden they've got a bill that you think is really bad. Well, are you going to really get up and bust their chops over it? When you know that you're seeing this person, you're going out to dinner with them, you're seeing them all the time, the tendency is not to want to do that. It's human nature. If we were to term limit, and guys knew, I'm only up here for a limited time, I want to represent the people in my district. I'm going to do the best I can because that's my reputation. Personally, I'm self-term limited, okay? My wife and I've talked about it. I said, I really don't want to serve any more than 3 terms in any office. I served 2 terms as mayor in Pocomoke, and I loved it. I loved being mayor in Pocomoke. But it's good to get fresh legs, new people, new ideas, get them in the game and let them do their thing. Same thing's true in the House of Delegates. Same thing will be true in the Maryland Senate. Have the impact that you can have, serve the people, not yourself. And then you've got nothing to be ashamed of when you get done, and nothing to look forward to what you can do in the other place. I look forward to the Senate. Can you imagine? I sit there and think about it. It's like it needs to be shook up a little bit. I think we're a little bit too settled on what we do.
Are there some issues that are more local, let's say to Pocomoke and Salisbury and Willards and the people who are living here on the Eastern Shore, some issues that need a spokesman in Annapolis?
Well, I'll tell you, our farmers certainly need somebody. Our watermen need somebody. But our families need somebody to speak up for the way the money doesn't find its way sometimes back to the Eastern Shore. And I'm not talking about the buildings and the little things that they like to do, the bond bills and things. One of the things that people, and I think people do get this, but I know they don't understand that every one of these projects that a politician brings back and says, looky what I've done, and we get the ribbon cutting and the big pictures, all that is debt. So they're bringing debt back to the Eastern Shore. They bring a lot of that money. All those bond bills all are debt that's been created on the taxpayers' back. So I'm not talking about bringing that back. What we need to bring back for ourselves and our people is a better representation of the money that we do send up there, whether it's through the gas taxes that are collected, the highway user revenues that do not really return back to the shore. when I'm sitting up in Annapolis feeling like a beggar at the table for money that our people have paid in, you know, and I don't like feeling like we're beholden to people because of the way it's disproportionately, you know, carved up there. If we can get the rural areas and the suburban areas that are most impacted negatively by a lot, they're the ones paying the bill. There's come a point in time where those people can stick together and start telling them, no, we're not going to do this anymore. We're already seeing losses. Baltimore City lost an entire Senate district in the last go-around. They should have lost 2. A lot of people don't know this. The Eastern Shore should have picked up a Senate seat, but we didn't. And the reason we didn't is because they maximized our population numbers and they minimized them in the metropolitan areas because they're losing their people and we're gaining people. So we should have another 3 delegates and another senator on the Eastern Shore. Now, what would that mean in Annapolis? Well, it's the Democrats that are responsible for how these things get divided up. And you talk about, you know, the things that are important to us down here on the shore, you know, whether it's my family having a job, how about my kids being able to have a life when they get out of school? You know, we have decent colleges here that we support. We've got a wonderful community college that's hugely successful. Our kids are graduating from these local schools and they're having to leave our state to go find jobs. Now, I don't want my kids, my daughter had to leave Salisbury University having graduated and is now working in Charlotte to get a job. And she was stayed here for a year trying to get something locally and everything else, really working within the field. Finally had to say, I'm out of here. We're going to go somewhere else. I said, you've got to go to where jobs are. And Maryland's not creating opportunities for our children. That's an indictment really on a system. You know how much we spend, Phil, billions of money of our tax dollars that are supporting the university system. We're subsidizing it. I mean, you know, we pay over half of the money that a Salisbury University student would have to pay. Those taxpayers subsidize that for our kids. And whether you believe in that or not, that's the investment that we make. Well, why should we make that investment and not expect a return on it within our local population? Those kids graduate, I want them to be Marylanders first. I want them to be entrepreneurs in this state. I want them to be thinking about how to grow our economy. They're growing it for Pennsylvania. They're growing it for Ohio. They're growing it for Virginia. They're growing it in Delaware. But they're not growing it here because we punish people that want to go into business in Maryland. We make it very difficult. That is counterintuitive to everything else that we talk about. What good does it do for us to say that we're #1 in education if we're the #1 exporter of knowledge outside of our borders and our own kids can't even find a life here when they get out of school? That's the thing that I think a lot of folks down here on the shore, we're outraged about our future and what our future looks like. And I don't want a future with my grandkids living in another state. I want a future with them growing those jobs here. And if we can't create an environment where people are willing to do that, then we're going to suffer the loss of our children moving. And that means their lives are going to be established somewhere else. And you know, we can't even, Phil, we're the worst state in the country to even retire to right now. We can't lay claim to anything right now that we're doing very well. And I said, if we're not doing anything really well, but we're actually doing some things very poorly, we have to change the way that we think about business and our economy and our government in Annapolis. And it's not like you just turn a knob up there and people change the way they think. You put new people in seats and they change the way the government thinks. And if you think the wheelhouse is being run right, well then by all means keep these guys in there. But if you think maybe just perhaps we could do better, then put some folks up there that are going to make a difference and that are willing to think outside the box and bring some new life into that place. I think we'd be shocked at how quick we could turn things around.
Yeah, and that's your goal. So talking about Salisbury University and Warwick and UMES, you have no problem with the investment we're making. It's the end result of where the graduates are having to go to find jobs.
You're absolutely right. If you're going to invest money if government's going to take your tax dollars and invest it in your kids in education, and we all say that that's important. A lot of Marylanders believe that that's important. Well, then likewise, they also believe in getting a return on the investment. And if we're not getting the return, instead of just talking about throwing more money at education, why don't we look at what we're doing that's creating an environment where we're not having those jobs? Why are they not birthing here in our state. We have the studies, we have the programs, we've looked at the tax structure, we see the corporate rates, we know where we're competitive and we know where we're not. Why is it so difficult for people in positions of authority to make the changes that are necessary for us to be successful and prosperous? You know, North Carolina went through the same thing a few years ago. They became very liberal dominated in the General Assembly, and with their governorship, they became one of the worst states. They were actually worse than Maryland when it came to business friendliness. It's hard to believe because everybody talks about North Carolina. Well, the reason they're talking about North Carolina now is because the changes that they made in their tax code, their fee, their permitting, all the way they approach business, they have turned themselves from being number 46 all the way to being number 17. They're now competitive with states that are surrounding us on a high level. They turned it around in 18 months. They've got a university system very much like ours. They're very thoughtful about how they invest in their kids, but they were losing their private sector to other states because they were non-competitive. They've become competitive. Now they're spending more money in areas because they've got more business. They've got more revenue. And that's the other side of it. We can't do some of these social programs and things that people like us to do if we don't have revenue. And if we start shrinking all these other areas, we're going to become a lot more dependent upon the federal government as more than we already are. And you know, that's not exactly the ship that I want to rely on when it comes down to brass tacks. And I really need to count on somebody. Counting on the government is probably the last thing I want to do. You know.
One thing that's peculiar to us on the Eastern Shore is the poultry industry.
Yeah.
Can our state senator and our delegates be an effective spokesman for the poultry industry and all of the related businesses that are involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have been to some degree by hook or by crook. I mean, to think that we would even have to debate a chicken tax or things like this up in the Maryland General Assembly is really an outrage. But it shows you there's a great disconnect between us and our counterparts that are growing up in these urban environments. We did an orientation bus tour for all the new delegates and senators. They do it every December after the election. There'll be one this December. When they brought the people down to the Eastern Shore, I was on the bus and I'm like, man, we'll go to a farm, you know, we'll go to some places. Well, they didn't take us to a farm. They took us to a winery in St. Michael's. And they gave us wine and cheese and told everybody that was the Eastern Shore. Okay? Now, anybody here, honestly, if you were there, now you got on that bus from Montgomery County or Baltimore City. The only thing you know about the Eastern Shore is you drive to Ocean City once a year and you go to the beach. All those we're passing farms on the way down, and I'm getting people on the bus from the city and from Prince George's and Montgomery County asking me, Mike, what's in those big metal buildings, those big long buildings over there? I said, you want to know what's in those buildings? I said, that's where we keep our money. That's our money over there. And they went, your money? I said, yeah, it's like a bank. I said, there's little birds in there. And I said, they produce our wealth. I said, you've heard of the chicken that laid the golden egg. Well, these houses are full of chickens laying golden eggs for us. And they all laughed. I said, no, that's a chicken house. It's a poultry operation. I said, that's where you should have your feet right now. I want to take you to a house that's got fresh litter. And I don't even make you walk around in dirty litter, but put you in some fresh litter, let you see the biddies, let you see what's going on a farm so you can appreciate and respect what these people do for a living. Or maybe take you to a boat and let you go see what the watermen have to deal with, you know, get you out there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when it's cold and they got to go out on the water. I said, put your feet in some rubber boots, you know, and see what that's all about, right? No, we didn't do any of that, Phil. We went to a winery. Okay, we went to a winery. And I said, no wonder people have a disconnect with us because we're not educating them. So one of the things of the General Assembly that we did, the Eastern Shore delegation, we work with DPI to put on a chicken day, you know, in Annapolis. So the last few years, you know, we have a day where we bring in fried and barbecued chicken, everything you can get, and feed them. Because if you want to get to a legislator's heart, man, feed them.
Right through the stomach.
Feed them, you know, pipe it into them. So we bring in some good chicken, and the lobbyists are all working those people. We bring in the farmers and people that are heavily engaged in the poultry and the grain industries and say, work this room. Educate these people about how important agriculture is, particularly for us down on the shore. And it's critical for us. That's why the regulations with the phosphorus management tool that's pending It's like this giant sledgehammer that the governor's got over our head right now. And it's like whack-a-mole. I mean, I feel like every time we try and come up for air, the administration hits us again. And if we can't get a handle on this regulatory environment, there's a reason why people aren't really building a lot of chicken houses in Maryland right now. Most of the construction on the shore is happening in Delaware. And the reason is permitting. You know, that we can't allow this to continue and expect us to hold market share. So if we lose market share, I mean, look around. You look at the buildings that are on campus, or you look at anywhere else in the city, look at your YMCA. Whose name is on that? Who gave a couple $1 million to support that? It's a chicken industry name. You know, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that's poultry money. That's where that came from. If we lose poultry, if we lose our farming heritage, we're losing our economy. It's not just, oh, we're going to do something else. We're going to lose the thing that actually makes us viable and deals with our marketplace. Every other job that we have around here is all tied to farming and the farm industry. If we lose that sector, or it's modified or it's penalized so bad that a farmer can no longer make a living, first of all, his kids are going to be out. They're not going to look for a future in farming. And if we don't have future farmers, my plate is going to be awfully empty. I need food, I need to be nourished, and if these folks are driven out of business, then our economy is going to suffer even more. You know, people think they've seen poverty and they think they have problems right now. You wait and see them pass a regulation that says we've got to cart chicken manure off the shore, or we've got to do something else with it other than spread it for corn, and see what the price tag is going to be on that. It's going to be an outrageous attack on our economy. And when I look and I see what's at stake for us in the future, if things like that are not rolled back, if you can't check that at the door in the Maryland General Assembly, then as far as the Eastern Shore is concerned, we're going to become basically a place that you pass through to get down to the tourist areas. We're going to become a place that's a wilderness area. Here used to rest farm families. Here used to reside an economy that was thriving. Oh, this place, it used to be Salisbury. Used to be a lot of things happening in Salisbury. Man, they were really a moving little place. Used to be called the Crossroads of Delmarva. Now it's just a crossroad that I go through to get to the beach, because there's nothing thriving down there if we've done away with ag.
Yeah. So the representatives from the Eastern Shore need to have a seat at the table when we're talking about the environment for Maryland and trying to be good stewards of the Chesapeake Bay. Our poultry industry and our farmers need somebody who's at that table saying, well, wait a minute, let's think about the effects of this on our economy.
Yes.
Is that? I think that's what you're saying.
I sat at that table with the governor, and I told the governor that his policies on the PMT and things like this, I said, Governor, you're far thinking. You're very way out in front. You know, you're bold. Your initiatives are bold, and it caught his attention. He's like, you know, he's not used to getting complimented by Delegate McDermott. And I said, well, Governor, you're a bold man. I said, I can respect that. You know, you want these initiatives. But at the end of the day, I said, you know, he said, well, that's good that you say that, Mike, because I believe that, you know, that Theodore Roosevelt said that it doesn't do you any good if you're the leader, if you get too far out in front of your people. They need to be able to see you so they can follow you. I said, Governor, that is absolutely true. I said, you should know right now that the watermen and the farmers and the Eastern Shore families, they need the binoculars to see where you are right now. I said, that's how far out in front you are from us. And it stunned him a little bit. He's taken back by that. The conversation continued and everybody asked different questions. Before we got up from the table, he turned to me, he said, why do the watermen need binoculars to see me? And I said, Governor, you don't have another 90 minutes for us to talk. I said, I'm glad to talk to you about it, but you need to know that you're way too far in front with your policies. And I said, if you can't build ground to get there that makes sense for all of us, I said, we have to have buy-in. And if there's no buy-in on policy, then people don't understand. They get afraid, they feel attacked. And I said, and our economy can't absorb those types of changes. It doesn't do us any good if we're not prospering. And I said, right now you're creating a situation where we're not going to prosper. And I said, it makes people want to just fight it. So that's one of the problems that we face in Annapolis. And you know, you can have a seat at the table, but if you can't articulate the position, or if the position is, what can I get out of this exchange? The exchange needs to be about education and making sure the folks that are sitting there know exactly what the problems are that you face.
Well, speaking of articulating, and you are a very articulate individual, I want you to look at that camera because we only have a minute left.
Oh, 1 minute.
And pretend that you're knocking on a door and potential voters have just opened the door. What do you say to them?
I say, hi, if you're happy with the way things have been for the last 8 years, if you like larger government, if you want to pay more taxes, if you want to see fees increase, if you want to see diminished returns from your educational investment, if you want to see more businesses leaving the state of Maryland, if you want to visit your kids in another state because they've had to go seek employment elsewhere, if you want the things that have been going on for the last 8 years to continue, then you vote for the folks that are in there right now, and you keep putting them in there. You keep putting these liberals and this liberal agenda in there. But if you want hope and change, if you want to really see what that looks like, if you want to understand how to get Eastern Shore values at the table in Annapolis, you better put people in there that are going to fight. That's why I'm running. I'm Delegate Mike McDermott. I'm running for the Senate seat in 38 because you deserve a voice in Annapolis. I have stood up in the House, and I will fight for you in the Senate. And I'll tell you what, give me 4 years up there and see if you don't see a change.
Thank you very much for being with us. Golly day, you've got me excited.
Thanks, Phil.
And I want to thank you for running, for putting your name out there and your hat in the ring, so to speak. I mean, it's important that good people run and are willing to serve us in state government. So thank you.
We need servant leaders, and without them, we're going to perish.
Well, we appreciate your being here with us on PAC 14, and all the best to you.
Thanks, Phil.
All right. And thank you for being with us right here on PAC 14.